So we will kick off with The Guardian, Josh. I think Daily Mail, sorry. I've skipped ahead. The Daily Mail, Leo.
So there's anger as the United Nations boss attacks Israel over the Gaza crisis. And he says, Antonio Guterres says the Hamas raid didn't happen in a vacuum because there's been ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine pretty much since day dot. I mean, going back to pre-Roman times, I believe. Yeah, if we want to take it back to then.
Except the Palestinians weren't there.
Yeah, the Palestinians weren't there. I mean, it's weird that all the woke left have sort of seized on sort of Muslims as the victims. Well, when Islam is the major colonising force across the Arab world.
That is true, absolutely. That's only sort of 600 or 650 AD, but it is a valid point. You've got to go, where do you start the clock ticking? I suppose if you go back far enough, these were tribes without names, prehistorical. I think it's the birthplace of civilization.
Well, the only national country with laws, with its own currency, with a king, right? The only sovereign state was Israel. Everything since then has been controlled by the Romans, the Syrians, and various other nations up until the Ottoman Empire, until the British took it over as the British mandated Palestine. Right. So there's never been another country there since Israel, since the Kingdom of Judea.
Right. So you feel you're on fairly solid ground in terms of the constitutional history of antiquity.
This is not that's the whole thing, this narrative of colonisation. Yeah. It's the absolute opposite. It's the only case of a colonised people actually being able to take their land back.
I mean, that said, in the last 60 years, it's sort of looked a bit more colonising. Yeah. It's not been quite so clear cut. So obviously there's been wrongdoing both sides, and there've been tit for tat battles. But at the end of the day, they've had various wars, pretty horrific wars, where the countries round about Israel tried to wipe it out. They said to the Palestinians, get off the land, we're going to wipe them out, and then you can have the land back. And they're wars that they lost. So why? I don't know. It just seems. And they're also complaining that they're going against international law with these airstrikes. I mean, fair enough, they are killing a lot of civilians. It looks horrific, and I don't trust that they know where Hamas are. I think it's not as precision as the IDF would have you believe. But I mean, it's a war. It's not like when the UK bombed Dresden, we were trying to minimise civilian casualties.
The issue that I find still confusing after 2 weeks, Josh, is the extent to which everything is just playing out as it inevitably would do. And I just cannot fathom what could have been Hamas's motivation in taking hostages if they didn't intend to release them. Was it simply to provoke Israel into committing crimes against humanity that would trigger a shift in world opinion? Is that
the question is whether they are, committing crimes against humanity.
I'm not saying they have succeeded,
certainly to control it, to make that the narrative. Yeah. No, my understanding is they had the backing of Iran, who also back Hezbollah in Lebanon, also have agents in Syria. So the idea was distract the IDF down south, and then they would attack from the north, which is what we've seen, some bombings coming over from Hezbollah. But of course, America was like, well, we're going to send some warships here, and have basically said to Iran, if this happens, we're going for you. So that has put a stay to that plan. There's another idea that it actually wasn't meant to be that successful either. So,
I certainly would believe, and witness reports seem to back up the idea that these were. There was an overarching plan 2 weeks ago, but the individual raiding parties had quite distinct approaches to it. Some of them seem to have been unbelievably bloodthirsty beyond imagination. Others relatively sort of orderly and disciplined in their activities. I don't know whether that just is human nature, whether that's just, an artifact of the decentralised system. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, not really. I mean, the things that I've been seeing coming out, as from the people they've captured and from bodies who were stopped, is that they had detailed plans. They had they were told. Now we're seeing some of these interviews come out with people who've been captured live, and they were basically told by their commanders that to basically kill all the men and to kidnap the women and in some cases to commit these most horrendous crimes.
So there's a subtly different take on The Guardian, although the front page is the same.
Well, it's really interesting, actually. I mean, if you look at both papers here, they basically do look pretty much the same. They've got the photo, they've got a thing, but they've got two very different ways that they present that information across. And in this one here, it's basically the Daily Mail, anger as UN boss attacks Israel. And of course, The Guardian's gone for UN calls for immediate ceasefire to end epic suffering in Gaza. Well, you know what? There's also epic suffering in Israel, where not only are they dealing with this mass onslaught against the people, but there's a huge exodus of people moving from the south of the country. There's a huge exodus moving down from the north of the country. But going back to this original speech, and that's partly my fault. I'm sorry, Leo, because I'm so excited about the story, and not excited is the wrong word, but
that's the word that came
built up all day, and is this speech that was given at the UN by the UN General Secretary what is like the most inverted, ridiculous warped thing. When he talks about here, he's talking about their land steadily devoured by settlements. Gaza. Israel pulled out in 2005. They haven't been there. There are no Jews there. Their economy stifled. Israel left them a multi-million-pound industry that they instantly destroyed, and destroyed all these warehouses that were flour.
Gaza is not under the same authority as the West Bank. The West Bank is where the settlements are going on, but that is not under the same authority, is it? That's completely separate